Okay, my name is Laura Wilson, and I own WilsonPrep, which is a test prep company in town. And I used to be an English teacher, and I used to work at Horace Greeley High School a long time ago, and I worked in the resource center. I was a reading specialist as well as an English teacher, so I'm very familiar with special ed, learning difficulties, how to vary instruction. So I am honored to be here today. And today's presentation basically is to familiarize you with the exams and to familiarize you with the process, because it's a scary process, and if you understand it, it's not going to be daunting. Okay? So the first thing I want to stress is that your children will end up happy, you will end up smiling, and your child will get into college. Okay? So parents who come to my office, usually there's a tissue box, they start crying. Trust me, happy campers. Okay, this is the agenda for today. We're going to start by discussing the two exams. We are then going to discuss a timeline. Even though we have 8th grade parents here, it's nice to know it's changed, when these tests start, when to start test prep. We're also going to discuss, very important, the different types of accommodations and the process. And then we're going to just discuss briefly, how do you address different learning issues in the test prep process? I think that's very important. And then, it's a little scary, but if you would like your child to start some skill building early on, I have some suggestions. And then we will end the presentation with test optional schools, and you're going to be pleasantly surprised. There's over 1,000 schools that are test optional. Okay? SAT versus ACT. Most of you, I am assuming, took the SAT. If you are an East Coaster, SAT. When we took the SAT, lots of reading, analogies, remember that? Antonyms, no more. Okay, the test dramatically changed in 2004, and then it dramatically changed again just recently in 2016. Okay? So since this is about the process, we're not going to go in depth about the two exams, but I'm going to give you an overview of the similarities and the differences. And since the SAT changed in 2016, good news, the tests are very similar. So prepping for one exam really helps you with another exam. So you can't make a mistake. And in my office, I'd say a good 40% of students take both exams. They start with one, and then they move to another. Students with learning disabilities often take the ACT, and we're going to discuss that. Okay. Now, in your folder, I put this chart. Save this chart. 8th graders, 9th graders, 10th graders, everything you need to know on this chart. Structure real quickly. ACT is at 36 points. It's a composite. Each section, there's 4 sections. 36 points, we average it together to get that composite. SAT, same as when we took it. The verbal is 800 points, the math 800 points, we get a total. Okay? The reading section, this is key with many of your learners. The SAT is a reading test. So if your child has a reading disability, ACT might be the better test. the reading level of the SAT is at a higher level than the ACT. I find the reading level of the ACT at around a 9th and 10th grade level, and I find the ACT is at a 9th and 10th grade level. SAT is 12th grade reading level. Now, if you look at the literature, they say that they're at the same reading level. They're not. Okay. Now, here's an example of an SAT question. Students are given a passage, they're asked a question, and then they are asked, in what lines did you find that answer? So it's a twofold process, and the questions are often inferential. So students have to garner the main idea, they have to understand the subtext of the passage, and then they also have to validate their answers by finding specific line references. On the ACT, it's all details. To me, I'm sorry, I'm on tape saying this, ACT readings are horrible. Okay? As a former reading specialist, I have to teach horrible reading strategies because it's time intensive. Students are given 4 800-word passages, 10 questions per passage. The questions do not go in order on the ACT, and they're stupid. They're detail oriented. So literally there might be a question that says, what color is the bird? And you say to yourself, what bird? Because as sophisticated readers, we skip over the details to garner the main idea in the subtext. On the ACT, you have to pick up the details. Now, if your child has extended time, this is huge, okay? Because your child has the time to find the details, and they don't have to engage in the inferential higher level thinking. So ACT is really a strong test for students who would get extended time. Okay? The grammar. The grammar is exactly the same on both exams. Once again, though, I find that the passages on the SAT slightly a higher reading level, and also there's more style rhetoric questions. This is not great for students who have a reading deficiency. ACT, more mechanical grammar. This is the section that's the easiest section to improve upon. Okay? So the good news is this can go way up with test prep. Why? Students think they know punctuation, and they don't know punctuation. And I give a perfect example of my own son, who in 8th grade, he left his laptop open, and of course, what is a mother to do? He never lets me look at his work. I looked at the essay, and I was very proud. It was 2 pages long, but then I looked closely. It was one long paragraph with no punctuation marks, so 0. And I wrote a grammar book. I said, Max, what's going on here? He said, Mother, I just don't believe in punctuation. Okay? And I find that a lot of our students don't believe in punctuation, but there's very visual ways to teach punctuation. So it's very easy for students to improve upon this area. Okay. The math, this is the other big difference. Once again, SAT is more of a reading test. The new math corresponds with the Common Core. The new math on the SAT, reading, word problems, heavy with the word problems. ACT, more literal. Okay, it's the same type of math, except the SAT surrounds the math with words. So students have to pull out the actual mathematical question. Now, I'm just going over this very quickly because I want to get to the actual process for students with disabilities, but I did want you to understand the two exams. This, charts and graphs. Parents call me all the time and they say, oh, my child is definitely an ACT student because my child excels at science. And I always say the same thing. All you need to know on the ACT is that water is wet. It has nothing to do with science. It's about reading charts and graphs. On the SAT, you have the same charts and graphs, except they're sprinkled in all the sections. How they put charts and graphs in the grammar section, I have no idea, but they do. Okay, so it's really the same. It's just sprinkled throughout on the SAT, and it's in one section, the science section on the ACT. Now, going back to timing and why, if your child has extended time, ACT might be the better test. Students are given on the ACT 7 passages, okay, science passages, basically 7 charts and graphs. 5 questions per passage. They have 35 minutes to complete these 7 passages, each containing 5 questions. Students without extended time notoriously run out of time. But if your child has time to process, and they might be slow processors, but if they have that time, they can decode this very easily. I included this in your folder. This is something you might want to look at next year, this year. You might be an SAT student if you, and I listed some things that makes your student stronger with the SAT. Okay? One thing I want to point out, lots of geometry on the ACT. Not as much geometry on the SAT. So if some of you are looking to do some skill building, maybe in the 9th grade and the 10th grade, geometry is a big thing on the ACT. Okay? Parents come to me all the time and they say, my child can't take the ACT because he is not in trig. I don't care. There's like 5 trig problems on the ACT. If your child is not in that upper level math, I'm not concerned with the last 5 problems of the test. Also, in good test prep, we can quickly teach about triangles, okay? So let's not worry about the level of math. That should not come into play with picking an exam. Okay? You might be an ACT student. Once again, I'm going quickly. This is in your folder. And I want to point out the weak working memory and the slow processing. Students without an IEP or a 504 who have slow processing, they basically have to take the SAT. The SAT, if you don't have extended time, equates to time and a half on the ACT. Basically, you have time and a half per question on the SAT. Does that make sense? So students who don't have 504s, IEPs, but yet they are slow processors, they don't have a choice. They have to take the SAT. Okay? I really just want to, especially since we have some 9th grade parents in the room here, the PSAT, your child does not have to take the PSAT. My children did not take the PSAT, and I own a test prep company. I knew they were ACT students. My children have 504 plans. They get extended time. I didn't want to have them sit through a test that I knew they were never going to take. PSAT, yes, it's a benchmark if your child is taking the SAT. And it is also used to determine national merit scholarships. So if you feel your child is in the top 1 percentile, then yes, needs to take the PSAT.
Or to just like junk mail, right? 'Cause you get all
Correct. Yes. If you don't take the PSAT, you're not going to get as much junk mail, which is a good thing. You know what? Remind me to discuss registering for the ACT at the end of this presentation. That might be the best thing you take from this presentation when I give you a hint on how to register for these exams. The comparison guide. This happens to be, I just updated it. I included a comparison guide in your folder. I know this is too much information right now, but what I wanted to provide you with was a folder you could file and you can pull out when you start this process and your friends start saying, well, my child is a genius. They got a 32. You can quickly look to see what a 32 is in SAT land that you can relate to, okay? So I included that comparison chart, but I want to make you feel a little bit better, okay? This should not be on tape, but when we took the test, it was a harder test, okay? So when you think about your scores, okay, they're a little elevated now, okay? The test is a little easier, but not really that much easier. So I do want to stress that parents come into my office with these expectations of like a 33. My child must get a 33 on the ACT. And I like to turn to a parent, and maybe that parent did get a 1460. I didn't get a 1460. I want us to think about what are we asking from our children. You know, think about where are you on this list and what are we asking our children to achieve. So just keep that in mind. I find when I think about where I was on that chart, I have to step back from my own children a little bit. This is something we can get into when your child starts 11th grade, but it's a good thing to keep in mind right now. Score choice versus super score. Okay? Almost all schools super score. Means they take the highest from the highest section from various tests. So you can vomit on a test and never submit the entire test. It's just vomit, okay? Or you can vomit in one section and ace another section. You show up the next test date and you reverse it. You then, yes, submit both tests. You do. But the colleges put the two highest scores together to create a super score. And parents say, oh my God, how do you know? How do you know that this? Okay. If there's 30,000 applicants to a college and they say they're super scoring with technology, I'm pretty sure the computer is spitting out the highest scores, okay? So super scoring is huge. And that's why often, since most schools are score choice and super score, I like your child to take the test as often as possible. That does not mean 8th grade, okay? Does not mean 9th grade, or 10th. But maybe we begin earlier than when we took the test. Most of us took it in May of junior year, and we took it in October of senior year. Now, this test is meant to be taken, keep in mind, senior year. Okay? It's a standardized exam. We know our children get smarter every year, and it is meant to be taken senior year. We are front-loading this in this district. It's not necessarily a bad thing, not a bad thing, okay? Because all God has to look down just once, that's it. So let's just keep showing up, okay? Now, okay, super scoring is huge for the ACT, huge. Not all schools superscore the ACT. Almost all schools superscore the SAT. Almost, not everyone. Some of the big universities don't. Okay? But if you superscore the ACT, it's very easy to manipulate the composite. Why? The ACT is like this. SAT is pretty solid. If you are testing at a 650, yes, test prep is going to get you up, yes. But you're not going to take the test one week and get a 700 and then the next week get an 800. It's not going to happen. But on the ACT, it goes like this. And I have students who show up for one test and might get a 25, let's say, in the reading section. They show up the next test date and they get a 32. That should statistically be impossible, okay? But it happens over and over again. So therefore, you take that 32 and you put it with some other scores, and that's why if you're going ACT, you take it often. Now, I included in your folder a list of schools that superscore. So once again, it might be too early for some of you, but I did include a list that you can start looking over. Okay. This one, I just
Excuse me,
think,
can I ask a
yeah.
quick question? For
Sure.
superscoring, do kids kind of focus the way they study? Like, for one exam, they only do math, then the next one,
Yes.
they only do verbal.
Yes. Some kids, yes.
Does it work?
Yes. Yes. Okay, absolutely it works.
Especially if you have a kid that gets stressed easy, right?
Yes, but you know what, I'm going to hold on to that question. It segues right into what we're going to talk about in just a moment, okay? Because it's a great question. And I'm going to show you how we can manipulate this, okay? Okay, the testing timeline, we don't really need to discuss this right now, but I did include it in the folder because so you can get a feel when your child is starting the process. I want you to see how often these tests are. It is important to map this out. Okay? Most students in this district start around here. Okay? And then they start testing very early. Okay? And at a certain point, they stop coming for test prep, and then they just keep showing up and taking the test. But students with anxiety, maybe they wait. Okay, maybe they start here. It depends on your child. There's various different options that you will be able to think about what's best for your child. Okay? I sometimes find that students who suffer from anxiety, one of the strategies we use with anxiety is your child signs up to take the test 5 times and they're not allowed to see the scores. They don't keep coming for tutoring. They don't. They just take a bunch of tests after they've had test prep. And in my office, they sign a little waiver, and they will not look at their scores until after, let's say, the May test, if they suffer from anxiety. That takes, I find, a lot of the pressure off because they don't know how they're doing. That's one strategy. Everything has to be personalized based on your child's learning. Okay? A lot of the athletes sometimes begin in October if they're playing a fall sport. Okay? Keep that in mind. And I love when students come to me and they say, I hate my parent. My parent is making me not go to college because my parent wouldn't let me start test prep until January. Okay? That's not true. Your child is going to college. I say you are. We all get to be the happy student that we began this presentation with, no matter when you begin. Okay, here we go. So, commonly requested accommodations. This is the important part of this discussion. I am finding that parents with children who have disabilities are not educated in how and what to sign up for, and they are making big mistakes. So I'm so glad you're here so I can explain a few things, okay? So here's some options, not all of them. You know, you can get a reader for dyslexia, stop the clock for health issues, extended time, either 50% or double time. I had one student who tried to get triple time, didn't happen. Okay, they tried. The most I've seen is double time. Okay? Now, this is where I want you to remember this screen. Okay, and I'm going to use stop the clock as an example. Okay? Let me show you what happens here. Okay. The first thing you do is in 10th grade, I recommend you meet with your counselor in 10th grade. If your child has a 504 plan, you want to make sure it's up to date, okay? Because ACT is the problem. You need that 504 within a 3-year period. SAT is not as much of a problem. So SAT, starting last year, if you have an IEP or a 504, they are granting extended time accommodations. It's ACT that's a little bit trickier, okay? So just make sure that the 504 or the IEP is in good standing, okay? Now, the SAT, the school handles the accommodations. If you are a parent of a 9th grader, did you receive a form at the beginning of the year to fill out for accommodations?
Yeah.
You did?
Yeah, 10th grade.
10th grade.
10th grade.
Yeah.
Okay, I got it.
Actually, it was the summer after 9th grade. So.
Okay. If you haven't filled it out yet, don't worry, you've got plenty of time, okay? But you will get a form in the mail. I say you have plenty of time because I forgot to fill it out for my own child, and I did it a year later, and it all ended up fine, okay? But the school is the one who files the paperwork. All you have to do is fill out the form, okay? It's a 7-week turnaround process, approximately. And I know the school likes to do it basically at the end of the summer or at the beginning of the summer because they want it in place for the PSAT. If your child chooses to take the PSAT in 10th grade, please don't have your child take the PSAT in 10th grade. Why add stress to your child? This is a standardized test. It's meant to be taken senior year. Why are we taking it in 10th grade? Please don't do that, okay? But if you want to start the testing process, the school does file it, so it is in place. Also, College Board, same as the AP exams, so they want the accommodations in place for the APs. SAT is easy. ACT is where we get a little bit of the problem, and that's why I'm glad you're here today. Many students with accommodations end up taking the ACT. There's first of all, the way the ACT works is you, the parent, have to register for an exam. Okay? So your child is going into 11th grade. Your child doesn't plan on taking the ACT, let's say, until December of junior year. I want you to register your child for the August ACT. Okay? August of going into junior year. I had my child, I registered to take the ACT for December of sophomore year. My child did not take the ACT December of sophomore year, but you must register. You then get a link after when you're registering, you sign up for national or special testing. And we're going to discuss that in just a moment. After you register, you are sent a link. You then send the link to the guidance counselor. The guidance counselor submits the IEP, the 504, the doctor's medical, and then there's a 2-week turnaround time, just 2 weeks, and then you get the accommodations in place. Many times with 504 plans, ACT denies you. They know that if your child gets extended time, it really changes scores. So therefore, they're very stringent about giving the extended time, okay? If your child is denied, life is not over. You can appeal and send follow-up paperwork. But that's why I want you to register your child early. So when I registered my child, sophomore year, as soon as he got his accommodations, I then switched the test to December of the next year. Okay? So I went in and I just changed the testing date. I think there was like a $10 penalty. Okay? So that's what you need to do, and ACT expects you to change the date. They do. Okay? Now, just as a personal note, my first child was denied, and I had to appeal. And so it does happen. That's why it pains me when parents spend a lot of money for test prep, and you put your child through the agony of test prep, and then you find out your child is denied. So let's get it in place. Now let's segue right over to, this is the big thing parents are not recognizing. Hello, we're in Chappaqua, me included. I see special testing. I'm like, my child is definitely special. I definitely want every accommodation possible. I am so signing up for special testing. I'm not national, I'm special. And I'm being flippant here, but that's what parents are doing. They think accommodations, they think special. Please don't do that. Okay? And let me explain why, and this leads to your question right here. Some of your children need special testing. They might have accommodations where they get double time. Okay? They might need a reader, or they might need stop the clock. But there are those students who just need, because of processing or working memory or some other learning issue, just need time and a half. Now, if you get time and a half national, that means you're not taking the test at Horace Greeley High School. It means you're taking it at a testing center like Yorktown. Okay? What's the beauty of this is it's self-paced. Your child is given 5 hours to take the exam self-paced. So if your child is a slow processor and really needs double time with the reading, because the reading, it's so time intensive. What your child can do is spend double time on the reading and maybe spend less time on the grammar. So we can manipulate how much time they're spending in each section. Yes?
If you do national testing though, and you're at a test center, are you in the same room with
No.
Okay.
No. Can I give you a little hint? Write this down. I'm giving you a huge hint. If you're doing national testing, sign up and go to Yorktown. Okay, sign up very early. Okay? Yorktown returns the tests faster than any other test site. Okay? And I find the proctors there are excellent in the special testing room. better than Sleepy Hollow or White House. See, I gave you a tip. Okay?
Is this SAT and ACT?
This is excuse me, no. I'm discussing national testing is for ACT, just ACT. SAT will always be a hard stop. So if your child gets time and a half, after time and a half, they say stop. Your child gets double time, after double time, stop. If your child for the ACT goes for special testing, clicks that button, that means your child is taking it at Horace Greeley High School, and your child might have to do a hard stop.
Yeah, but it's 2
at
days,
time and a
Laura.
half. What?
Special testing with extended time is 2-day testing.
Not always.
It is. It absolutely is. 2-day testing, Saturday, Sunday. Big difference if you have attention issues.
Absolutely, and some students definitely need that. But this year, there's a lot of students who have signed up for special testing, who are doing it in a 5-hour, who end up having a hard stop.
Then they don't have the extra time accommodation maybe.
They have with computer.
Right, so they don't have extra time, but if you have extra time and you do the special, you get the multiple day, which
Correct,
helps.
but some students, what I'm trying to explain is you don't want to do multiple day if your child does not have severe ADD. Now, if your child does have attention issues and maybe has to do it over 2 days, absolutely you want to do special testing. I have so many parents who sign up for special testing over 2 days, they think it's better, but their child is such a slow processor that it ends up hurting them. So I don't know, we all have different learning disabilities here, but this is something to think about. Yes.
So just to make it 100% clear, when if you do the national, you get 5 hours, and they could spend all 5 hours on 2 sections and throw the others in the garbage,
Yes.
basically. But special testing, it might be, especially if it's administered over 2 days,
Correct.
that they only give them 2 sections one day, 2
Correct.
sections the other.
And if
So
it's 2 sections on one day, it's a hard stop. It's a hard stop after each section. Not after the 2 sections, after each section. And some definitely do need over 2 days. Some students take it over 4 days. Many do that, okay? And that's a good thing for some students. So they take it 1 section each day. The problem with that is your child is being pulled from school for 4 days. That gets to be an issue. Once again, different learning, okay? I have some students who think stop the clock. I'm going to use my own son as an example, okay? My own son has stopped the clock and time and a half, okay? Now, if I didn't know better, I would have clicked for special testing, and I would have said I want both. But then he would have taken it at the high school, and he would have had to have done a hard stop after each section, because he was also doing stop the clock. Is that making sense? But I own a test prep company. I know, so I specifically said, I know he has stopped the clock on his 504, I don't want it. And I only want national testing, and I said my son has to, he has to manage his time, okay? Because he's such a slow processor, he needs to manipulate those 5 hours. Plus, honestly, if you figure it out, your child gets an extra half hour doing self-paced. If your child is a very slow processor, they build in a half hour for breaks. Child can take a break whenever they want. But some children, like my son, he uses that extra half hour. Okay?
Can
Yes.
you just explain stop the clock, because I think a couple of people may not know what it is.
Okay, so some students have Crohn's, colitis, other stomach issues, or they might have arthritis. So stop the clock means you raise your hand, you have to use the bathroom, or you have to take a break for whatever reason, and the clock stops. Child goes to the bathroom, comes back, clock starts again. Okay, that stopped the clock. Yes.
So for national, is that relevant to both of those or only the special testing?
Only, so if I can't believe I'm on tape discussing.
You want me to?
child. No, that's okay. But if I had gone for stop the clock, which he needs, I would have only been able to do special testing for him. But I also knew that he needed 5 hours. He needed that extra half hour plus the self-pacing, because he's so slow with the reading, but he's strong with the math. Okay? So I did national testing, and I prayed that everything would be okay. And if it wasn't okay, well, okay, so we vomited on that test. We show up for another. Does that make sense? But it's very hard to go from special testing to national testing. And that's why I'm spending so much time on this now. This is something, before you sign up, you should think about. Because parents have a hard time switching. Now, if you look in your folder, I think the 2 best pages I put in is I did put in how to register for the ACT, and I put in the difference between national and special testing. So you can look this over. You can always call me and ask me, okay?
So when might special testing be better?
What?
When might special testing be better than national?
Okay, special testing is better if severe ADHD or ADD.
They just can't sit that long.
They can't, it's not fortuitous to sit for 5 hours. It's torture. Some students don't use their extended time because they just can't pay attention, okay? So maybe that's better to do it over 2 days or 4 days. Okay? But we try to work with students to see, can we, too many students don't use their accommodations. And good test prep, we force them to use their accommodations. But definitely special testing is the right thing for so many students. It is. But it's not the right thing for every student. That's what I want to stress, okay? And some students, most students, don't need more than time and a half. They don't. But if you have a really weak working memory or processing speed that some of our children do, then they do need even more time. Okay? Yes?
So what about the relationship between, say, their IEP and your request? If they're getting time and a half at school, can you ask for double time on the
No.
ACT? No, it's got to match.
Yes. But for example, my son has stopped the clock and time and a half, but I made very specific to my guidance counselor, don't apply for stop the clock. I just want time and a half. So this, you had asked a question about, can you spend more time on one, on another? It depends on what you're signed up for, okay? But I have some students who, my son still can't make it through the test, okay? And so now he's going to sacrifice the grammar so he can get to the science, so we can get a good score there, and we super score.
And he can completely allocate the 5
Yes.
hours, including
Yes.
math
Yes,
across.
yes.
And you don't touch the other section? Or
Well,
you just
no,
sort of
so
breeze
instead
through it?
of, whatever his learning issues are, and he is only allowed now, Mom is only allowing him to spend, let's say, 45, 50 minutes on the grammar. Some of our students might have OCD or whatever. They have to move on so that he can spend the time on the science, which is the last section. All of our children have different learning disabilities. Some of our children do have OCD. We have to work at, that's how we can change scores. Okay?
And then scores come in and she can figure out what you need to juggle.
That's why you're going to Yorktown. Let us make that clear. So students just took the April exam. Yorktown came out a good 2-3 weeks ago. Sleepy Hollow still has not returned the scores, okay? Sleepy Hollow is notorious for national testing. They can take up to 7 weeks. I don't know what's wrong with that school. Yorktown, you get it back, for the most part, my luck, not when your child takes it, right away, okay? So it's around a 10-day turnaround. Sometimes a little more for testing. Now, this is a good question. If your child does special testing, it's not a 10-day turnaround. It could take 5 weeks. And it gets to be a problem because you have so the problem, let's see if I can do this. Problem is, you take the April exam, right? But then with special testing or Sleepy Hollow, you might get it back a week before the June exam. So I had one client last year who got it back after the June exam. So you don't know whether to sign up or not.
Well, you could sign up and move it, right?
Yes, you can, of course.
Where do they grade the test? They don't know mail it to the same place?
Well, that, I don't know. It's a mystery to me. I'm not sure. And I'm on the camera, so I don't want to give away my secret with the Yorktown. Yes.
But if you do national testing, that tends to go with the Gen Pop like
Yes,
testing.
correct.
I know the special is like,
Yes.
it also matters, I know if you do it really, sometimes the tests need to be all collected and they send
Well,
them
I
out.
also like to think of it the following way. It's a pecking order. So they get all the national testing graded, then they start on the special testing. So it's at the bottom of the pile. And they release them in waves. So it's not like every day, it's like on a Wednesday and a Friday. Yes.
Very quick question. The previous slide said that the guidance counselor sends a 5-4 IEP in the
Yeah.
medical. Did it say that for the ACT, the medical report needs to be within the last 3 years?
No, the medical, it depends.
Is there a time limit on how?
Um,
Obviously, it can be 5 years old, but
I'm not sure about that with the medical. What I often find is that, when your child is denied, that's when you go and revisit the doctor and get a more current doctor's note. Okay. Other questions? I always believe more is more. So you might ask your guidance counselor, like if you have an IEP and your child has been, it's solid, it's not questionable, then don't worry about it, okay? But if it's a 504, your child hasn't had testing, let's say, within the last 3 years, I always tell the guidance counselor to submit everything. So maybe a doctor's note, the 504, everything. Okay, it helps. Yes.
I'm sorry if I'm getting too detailed, but with the psychoeducational testing for the IEP, you have to recertify every 3 years. And so if it doesn't go your way before, then can you go private and start that process over
Yes.
also?
Yes.
And they accept private as opposed
Yes.
to Chacopas?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. They definitely accept private.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, this is another huge, something that you need to write down and remember. When your child gets accepted to college, remember happy student at the beginning of the presentation? Many colleges will not accept your 504 or IEP, and they require adult normed testing. And the problem is your child shows up the first day and says, hello, here I am, here's my accommodations from high school. And they say, well, no, that's not adult normed testing, and your child does not have accommodations at college. So I highly recommend that you make sure as your child leaves for college, and if you want the accommodations in place, you might have to go private at that time to get the adult norm testing. Some colleges are very, very giving of extended time and accommodations, and some colleges are not. Okay, so specific testing strategies. When you want to start test prep, you want to make sure that the tutor understands your child's learning disability. It's very important. I find that parents they give, oh, my child has a 504. Okay, well, what's the specific problem? And I think that's very important because there's various strategies. For example, if your child is tactile, we can use a lot of props. Here we have geometric figures. You have the child working with different shapes. But if we don't know your child is a tactile learner, then we might not pull this out, okay? In your folder, I have included, there's different fun ways to teach, let's say, grammar. I put in the folder just an example. We use a lot of, for visual learners, different colors. Maybe it's math flashcards, or we play dress up. This is a preposition. This is front modification. We play with paper dolls. I'm being silly, but it works. Okay, it depends on your student's learning style. Make sure that the tutor knows. Okay, so I gave an example. How to prepare early. Well, I think YouTube and Khan Academy are fabulous. Okay. For our visual learners, there's so many YouTube videos, and I highly suggest, even in 9th grade, if you can get your child, what I did for this presentation is I provided you with a chart of all of the skills that are tested on the SAT and ACT, so you can see the crossover. And I did for the math and for the verbal. So if you want over the summer to build skills, one strategy is watch a YouTube video, a Khan Academy video, and then maybe buy, these are two excellent books. It says ACT, but it's the same thing as SAT. As a matter of fact, Erica Meltzer, a friend of mine, it's really the same book, okay? So one she sells as an SAT English book, one she sells as an ACT English book. It's the same exercises, okay? And the same thing with the math. This math book, I find, prepares students for both exams. And it's great. These are worksheets, good for 9th and 10th graders. They're worksheets. Any questions? I included.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah,
Can
sorry.
I ask you, I know you probably are shy to do this, but could you explain your sophomore skill building for, I'm a huge proponent of this for this community because it was a very non-stressful, non-time intensive way to get some of that skill building done for English, and it really worked for Liam. He did pretty well on the grammar, and he could not handle at that age as a sophomore any more tutoring than I was already throwing at him just to get him through school. But that was like just the right pace.
So I am a former English teacher, okay? And I also wrote a grammar book, written a few damn books. And this book by Capstone Publishing, this grammar book is in schools across the country because it ties in with the Common Core. Okay? I also have written some essay books. So what I do in 10th grade is I truly believe that, I can't believe this, I own a test prep company. I honestly don't really believe in test prep. I don't. Okay? I believe in skill building, and the letters and the emails that I most value are the ones that I get from my college students who say, Mrs. Wilson, you taught me how to read, you taught me how to write, and thank you. Okay? I'm not about teaching to the test. So in 10th grade, what I do is I spread it over, there's like 8 sessions. We start in October, it's once a month, and we use the paper doll or whatever, and there I teach different skills each month. And it ties in with the regents that they take at the end of 10th grade. And hello people, Common Core, the English regents that changed. Guess who is in charge of the new SAT? David Coleman. He's the one who orchestrated the Common Core. So the two exams are very similar. Okay? So prepping for the English regents, prepping for school, becoming a better writer, a better reader, is also preparing students for the SAT and ACT. So yes, from that 10th grade class, I find your child is a good 6 weeks ahead of everybody else. With
Even
test
the
prep.
reluctant ones.
What?
Even the reluctant.
I love teaching. Okay, so I enjoy working with students, and we work on punctuation, subject, verb, how to read nonfiction. I included for your student, and I can send you a videotape of how to read nonfiction. And I find that there's so much nonfiction, and students don't know how to read it. You know, I even see my own son, he reads every word, not anymore. I taught him the trick. There's tricks to nonfiction reading after a thought reverser, what I call birthday words. But, instead, rather, though, however, despite, although, yet. You circle those words in nonfiction, you underline the sentence that comes afterwards. On a test, there will be an answer right there, but also as sophisticated readers, I don't say this to students, actually a thought reverser is qualifying a main idea. The writer is presenting an idea, and as soon as you include a thought reverser, but we're changing that main idea. And that's where students have to pick up on those changes. So that's a visual that I teach them, and they get to be much faster readers doing it. Any other questions? Yes?
I don't know if it's possible to generalize in this way,
Mhm.
but is there one section of the test that kids tend to find more challenging?
It depends on the student. It really depends. The SAT students are a little shocked with the non-calculator section. It's a brand new section. Why? Because they come out of the room holding a calculator. All we have to do is reteach multiplication tables, and then it's not scary. Students have trouble with the reading section.
And not the writing section as much?
No, that's very teachable. The writing is not the problem. And the essay is optional on both exams, so we didn't discuss it today. The grammar, very teachable, because you can teach it from a reading perspective, or you can teach it from a math perspective. So it's that I see a big increase. It's reading. It's very hard to change 11 years of reading. Our brains are programmed. So that's why those strategies like the birthday words and other ways to skim a passage, that's key, but that's the hardest for students, often. We do a great job in this district with math. I find our math scores higher than other school districts. we do a great job with the math. I'm not saying we don't do a great job with the reading, we do, and the writing, we do. It's just, that's a hard, our brains are wired, and it's very hard to change reading scores. But that leads me to the SAT is a good thing, and I'm going to end this. So if you have a very weak reader, and time is not, you don't need 5 hours, the beauty of the SAT is 400 points reading, 400 points grammar. So technically, you can cover a reading weakness with the grammar. And a lot of students really benefit from that. Okay, and it's a huge strategy in my office, is let's get that grammar at close to 100%, and we're going to cover the reading deficiency. Okay? I'm here if you have any other questions. I do want to stress, there's over 1,000 schools where you don't have to take the ACT or the SAT. If you look at that list, there's some great schools on that list, okay? I also want to stress, we began the presentation with a maze and a happy child, okay? The key thing is not to get stressed out over this. It's not. You have so many opportunities. And if we can teach our child, who cares about one test? It's a process. They end up happy. Okay? So, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.